Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Driving Efficiency, Unlocking the Power of Propane Autogas for Your Fleet, presented by the Propane Education and Research Council, or PERC. I'm Alex Drummond, Executive Editor for Metro Magazine, and I'll be your moderator for today's event. I encourage you to ask questions during the webinar at any point, and we'll try to address them all. However, if we do not get to yours, you will be contacted by email with a response after the event. Our speaker today is Joel Stetheit, Senior Manager, Autogas Business Development for PERC. Before joining PERC, Joel spent over 20 years in the education sector as Transportation Director of Bethel School District in Spanaway, Washington State. There he learned the district's propane autogas school bus program, seeing the benefits of propane for fleet operations. Today, Joel leverages his background to be a trusted resource to fleet managers, propane marketers, and OEMs, informing them of propane autogas industry research, funding opportunities, and technological advancements. Thank you for being here. Joel, thanks for joining us.
Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining this webinar. Good morning if you're on the West Coast, or good afternoon if you're on the East Coast. Thank you for joining us again. I would like to start with the overview of today's webinar. I'll be going over the benefits of propane autogas for your fleet, how to adopt propane autogas to your fleet, what the infrastructure looks like. I'm going to discuss renewable propane, and I'm going to share some real-world successes. So there are more than 60,000 propane autogas vehicles on the road today. Applications include school buses, paratransit fleets, corporate and commercial fleets. There are more than 22,000 propane school buses on the road, providing safe, clean, reliable transportation for students every day. Transit fleets have adopted propane autogas in their fleet for some of the same reasons, but they're also providing a clean environment to their riders and to their community. Private and public fleets have adopted propane to their fleets because of their sustainability goals, and they see the cost-saving benefits. A couple examples of corporate fleets that use propane today in their fleet would be Bimbo Bakery and Primo Water. They can continually buy propane vehicles to help with their sustainability efforts and to see those cost savings that propane provides. Also, national parks that use people haulers, they too have, some of those have implemented propane in those people haulers to give a quiet, clean environment and a better environment for their visitors to their parks. Propane companies too also use propane in their fleets, not only to deliver propane, but in their service vehicles or their admin vehicles. So there's quite a few that have adopted propane in their fleet for that. So, why do they choose propane? One, first of all, propane offers a clean, reliable, affordable, and sustainable solutions to their fleet. They're looking, a lot of fleets are looking to change their carbon footprint, what they want to do with their fleet, and propane can help with that. Propane offers the best total cost of ownership compared to diesel and gasoline fuels. The return on investment by adding propane to your fleet takes about 2 to 3 years to see that investment equal out. It also meets and or exceeds the operational efficiencies that are expected in your fleet. And then propane helps meet the sustainability goals also. Are you looking to lower your carbon footprint? Are you looking to look at that cost savings that propane can provide? Most propane consumed in the United States is domestically produced. So that is a great domestic energy source that we can rely on and with propane. With the lowest cost of ownership, Propane has been used in vehicles for more than 70 years. This is not new technology. Um, However, as the technology has changed in vehicles, such as a carbureted engine to a fuel-injected engine, the propane systems have also changed over the years to, one, help with emission standards, and two, get to see fuel efficiency. Propane vehicles meet and exceed the exceed the performance compared to diesel and gasoline. So, people don't think that propane can offer the same uh, performance that propane shows that it can, and with the systems. Also, propane offers, the lowest uh, total cost of ownership compared to electric and diesel alternatives. Propane offers a lower price per gallon compared to gasoline and diesel, and that domestic production helps lead the stability for pricing um, for your fleets. So propane stands out to be a cost-effective and sustainable transportation solution. Now, I'd like to go over some of the benefits of the maintenance with the vehicle. Uh, First of all, since propane is so clean because it's 3 carbons and 8 hydrogens compared to gasoline, which has 8 carbons, and diesel even more, it is a very clean fuel to use in the fleet, which helps with longer engine life and compared to diesel and gasoline. And then also it helps with that cost per mile and that on that return that you're seeing as you do your studies of your fleet compared to other fuels. Another benefit that propane has in maintenance, propane vehicles normally use about 8 quarts of oil and a standard filter from a gasoline engine, compared to diesel that uses 16 to 20 quarts of oil and an expensive filter that you would use in that oil change. With propane vehicles, there's no expensive after treatment systems like diesel, where that diesel filter has a particulate with the DEF system, the after treatment systems. Those things are very expensive, one to replace or to repair. So there is, with that, propane offers the fewer contaminants, that are those particulate matters that diesel provides in their systems. And lastly, on the maintenance side, if you have a maintenance garage and you want to adopt propane, you do not have to change your garage. If it is set up for diesel or gasoline, propane works great in your garage. You don't have to worry about explosion-proof outlets or lighting like you do with CNG. The infrastructure with propane, it could be grid independent if you need it to be, and meaning that you don't have to rely on the electrical grid. It also, the propane infrastructure can be at low or no cost to you when you're working with your provider. And then your infrastructures also can be scalable. So you can start small and grow over time as you grow your fleet. This next slide is just, represents a Type C school bus. And what it's doing is it's comparing the cost per mile based on each fuel type. What they did here was they took the annual miles traveled for the bus, the number of years it operated, the fuel economy, and the price per gallon comprise this information. Lower fuel prices, and reduced maintenance needs make this affordable with propane. You can see that propane has won hands down as the lowest price per mile compared to any other fuel. I briefly talked about performance and reliability. Propane delivers the power needed for the demand of your fleet. It works for delivery vans or delivery trucks and work trucks, and school buses included, without any compromise. Fleet managers can count on propane with a less downtime without sacrificing that downtime for compared to when you're working with emission systems like in diesel, and then they also see the cost savings. The performance side of propane, there's quick acceleration, and the hauling capacity is there, and excuse me, and you can rely on propane in cold temperatures. There are propane vehicles in the North Slope, Alaska, where they're operating in negative 40 degrees on a consistent basis with a lot of permafrost. You also have school districts and fleets and paratransit fleets in northern Minnesota that also have extreme cold temperatures. They don't see a downtime by using propane. The performance and reliability is there, and that's why they continue to use it. Warm areas such as Arizona and Texas, propane works in those areas without any problems. So there's benefits to both warm and cold areas throughout the United States, and propane easily wins that battle. The reliability with propane, with the correct infrastructure, fueling times are very comparable to diesel and gasoline. Propane, with the right infrastructure, you can fill a vehicle comparable 10 gallons a minute, just like you do with diesel and gasoline, so that the fueling times, they're not an issue with that. And drivers can fuel their own buses because propane is so safe, and the infrastructure used to fuel the vehicles leaves it to proper training for the driver to do that. Propane is also considered a fuel. Propane also doesn't degrade. So if you put propane in a tank today and a year later you go to use it, it will not degrade. It'll be the same propane that you put in before. Unlike diesel and gasoline, they tend to degrade over time. So you don't have that problem with propane, and so that's a benefit. As it depends on the fleet that you're using. So example would be like a school bus operation, where 9 months of the year those buses are moving, but during the summer they don't, and that fuel sits there, so you don't have to worry about that. And then propane systems also can be off grid. Depends on how you want to do your fueling or need. So it's very much grid independent. Propane is recognized under the Clean Air Act, making it a compliant and credible alternative fuel option for your fleet. The U.S. Department of Energy states that propane provides public health and the environment. Public health and the environment provides safety benefits and contributes to a resilient transportation system. So Propane Autogas offers 22% fewer greenhouse gas emissions compared to diesel and gasoline, or gasoline and even more with diesel. So also propane vehicles offer a 0.02 NOx or nitrogen oxide or lower, which this is 36% lower than diesel vehicles. So with propane, you do not have to worry about groundwater and soil contamination. So if you have a propane leak, in a vehicle or a spill, propane is non-toxic. So it vaporizes in the air. So it's a low-lying fuel. It's a heavy fuel. As it dissipates, it'll dissipate quickly, and it does not saturate the soil compared to diesel or gasoline, where you have to worry about EPA issues, concerns with that. Propane is so clear, are clean when used in a vehicle, or even, I'm going to use the example as your barbecue. Propane is the same. Your supply for propane in your barbecue and your vehicles are the same propane. You cook your food with propane. You eat your food with propane. It's that clean. And with that, the same thing with in your propane vehicle. It doesn't have any carcinogen properties to it, and so it doesn't trigger, respiratory concerns like asthma. So that's huge compared to diesel, where those particulate matters are greater with diesel. The U.S. Department of Energy says diversifying the United States supply with domestic fuels like propane has helped reduce the overall use of imported petroleum in recent years. Since propane is domestically produced, we produce about 30 billion gallons of propane a year. Now, we only consume 10 billion gallons through, either auto gas, agriculture, and home for heating and cooking. The other 20 billion gallons get exported to other places in the world. So with propane being reliable and consistent supply, that helps the stable pricing of your fueling costs. So unlike, where if you see the fossil fuels like diesel and gasoline in the foreign oil, you see the spikes in pricing. Propane is very a stable price over the years. So you're not seeing that rise and lowering effect. It's just very, very clear. It is also reliable and consistent supply to ensure that fleets continue functioning when other fuels may be limited. So, for example, is if you're in the Southeast and you have a storm that comes through, and propane is there to help with your fleet to keep it moving, where those supplies may be limited, for your fleet. Ample refueling sites provide flexibility for your fleet. So we'll talk about that, later on. And then you also have a quick deployment for your fueling infrastructure. And we'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later on too. So, there's some options here. Now you've heard about some of the benefits of propane and of adopting it to your fleet. Now let's go over some critical steps you need to take to help prevent some roadblocks as you do this. As you transition your fleet to propane autogas, first of all, here's a little roadmap to follow. You'll want to do a fleet analysis of your fleet. And what does that mean? You're going to assess the miles driven in your fleet. You're going to look at your fuel costs and the gallons used by fuel. So if you're gasoline or propane or diesel, take a look at both of those. You're going to evaluate your vehicles that are using in those fuels. You're going to look at the routes that those fuels take. And then one last thing is you want to look at what vehicles that you're looking to replace. So, and then I would add too is how does propane fit in your sustainability goals when you're meeting that, looking at that to when you assess those, assess your fleet. You'll want to plan financially and what that's going to look like. You're going to find a dealer, or a propane marketer. They can help with that fleet analysis. They're going to take a look at that information that you gather. They're going to do some comparison as you convert your fleet to propane, and then they can show you that that total cost of ownership and the return on investment, what that's going to look like. And so that will help make your decision right there. And then you have to determine, there's a couple different systems out there. You can do a dedicated system, meaning that it is a sole propane driven vehicle, or you can do a biofuel system. So it has both, it uses the unleaded engine, and there's a conversion system that can be added for propane, and so it can extend your range there. So you just take a look at your fleet to see which one is going to best suit you. Then you're going to work with a propane provider to determine the fuel infrastructure and what that may look like. And then you would determine also, you're going to train your staff on fueling, what the safety of fueling. And then if you have a fleet of mechanics, you're going to you want to train them on the propane system. Now, the great news about propane systems, they don't really take any special tools, so your mechanics have most of that already in their toolbox, or there might be, something small to purchase for them. So that helps, and both providers can help with that training for your mechanics. So that's good news there. And then as you implement those propane vehicles into your fleet, you'll want to do another fleet analysis. This will help you, one, see your return on investment as you have switched your fleet, those vehicles, to propane, to see how they are working within your fleet. And you're going to be able to maybe do some different assessments of how the vehicle is being used, and where you might be able to see a better gain on what your goal is with that vehicle. So you'll just want to make sure that you do that analysis, and that will help you make adjustments as you buy more propane vehicles to your fleet and how you're going to use them. As you're scaling and future-proofing your fleet, one, you want to look at the environmental benefits and the reduced emissions that you are seeing, in your sustainability goals. A lot of the goals that you look at are reduce the carbon footprint. Propane helps with that. So really take a look at that, and you can continue to work with your propane marketer and your propane dealer for that vehicle to help with. You'll also want to look at the cost savings. You're going to sit and monitor those cost savings. You'll get to celebrate what those cost savings are as you track them, and that helps with the increase of resiliency and reliability of your vehicles, and you'll be able to continue using that infrastructure that you're going to put in, which you can put in almost anywhere on your property. And like I said, I'll talk a little bit more about your infrastructure, but it's something that you'll definitely want to look at, and how that's going to fit into your operation. And you want to make sure that you do some practical considerations like phasing in your propane vehicles, and the infrastructure planning, and the training and maintenance. So as you bring on these vehicles, you want to make sure you keep on moving forward with the training, and making people aware of the vehicle, so they're not afraid to drive them. And what I think you'll find is, as you bring these vehicles on, these are the first vehicles that people will want to drive, because they find the benefits of, one, they're cleaner, and they're quieter, and they're reliable. So that speaks a lot to the vehicle and the fuel being used in it. And also, don't let the lack of incentives stop you from continue moving forward your fleet to propane. Propane, again, has a quick return on investment, and without even the incentives. So make sure that you take a look at those, and don't let, take advantage of every incentive, but don't let it stop you from taking the next step. Now I'm going to cover a little bit about fueling infrastructure. First of all, I want to point out with this is, you want to work with an expert in the propane. You want to work with an expert. Propane marketers are not all the same. There are some that specialize in propane autogas and that infrastructure, and those are the ones that you want to use. So you want to, as you work towards looking at those vehicles, you need to ask for some references that use propane. First of all, references of propane marketers that put that infrastructure in. But two, their clients or customers that they're working with, because you'll want to check those references. You want to see what hurdles they had to jump through, how they're providing service to you, because you want to be successful with your rollout of propane autogas to your fleet. And that infrastructure is one of those key things that will help you with that. So make sure you do those reference checks, and before you move forward and selecting a marketer. One thing about fueling infrastructure on propane, it's pretty easy to install. It is something that you're going to work with your propane marketer on. It's the least expensive alternative fuel system to install, compared to I'm going to say electrification or CNG. And what you're going to do with propane, your infrastructure, it's scalable. So start small. If you're only going to implement a couple of vehicles into your fleet, you don't need to go with a large system. Start small with the refueling infrastructure, and this can be upgraded without any major capital investments. The flexibility with this, it also keeps the long-term costs low, and it can help with the support with your fleet growth. Fleets can use both public and private stations. A public station is out. I say a private station is your on-site fueling station. A public station is something that you may see at a local gas station, but not every propane tank out there is set up for autogas. So you definitely want to talk to your propane marketer that maybe has some fueling infrastructure beyond your location, and then you want to see what options you have there before you make that decision. There's 4 types of on-site propane fueling infrastructure they can go through. And I'm going to talk about these a little bit more. There's a standard station, advanced station, temporary, and mobile. So I'll go into that a little more detail here. With the private station, this is something you can do one of 2 ways. With any of these, you can do one of 2 ways. You can either choose to buy the infrastructure for your fleet, or you can lease the infrastructure. So the propane supplier is going to lease that. And so a standard station is going to be up to 3 1,000-gallon tanks. It's going to include a dispenser and a pump, so you're going to need that to be able to fuel your vehicle. And, this is ideal when you start small. We're talking, 1 to 50 vehicles, and so that's a benefit right there. And so as your fleet grows, you can jump to that advanced station. So that advanced station then can be, you're going to go beyond those 3 1,000-gallon tanks. You're going to add a second dispenser in or more, and you're going to increase your propane tank sizing up to a 30,000-gallon tank. So again, if you're working with your supplier and you're leasing it, again, this is going to be a no upfront cost. But if you are scaling and you're buying your equipment, going from that standard to the advanced station, there are going to be some cost to that. So you have to plan for that. And there's some temporary fueling options there too. So, if you are working to get your infrastructure in place, you already have your propane vehicles, you can use a bobtail, which is that propane truck that comes in and fills your tanks to help fill your vehicles on a temporary basis. There's a flatbed trailer that has a tank on it with a generator, and I have some pictures of this stuff coming up, so I'll talk about it a little bit more. And then, if propane, or excuse me, and if power is a problem, there's some off-grid options too there for you. So there's some options as you go to scale your fleet up to sizing. So what's needed for any of these stations? You have to have some site prep. But I'm going to tell you, first of all, you want to plan for the future. So if you decide that you're going to put a standard station in, you're going to start with that site prep of that, but you might want to think about increasing that infrastructure site prep for future growth, because as you buy vehicles, you may want it to grow that, and so you're going to need a little bigger footprint because of the size of propane tanks you're going to have. And you are going to take and work with your propane provider with this. So with that in mind, you're going to be discussing what your goals are with your fleet and where you want to head towards, and and what those infrastructures costs are going to be. Your propane marketer that's going to supply your infrastructure can help with this. They can help with that site prep, the permit process. So really, it can be very easy for you as the end user to have more of a hands-off approach and let the propane marketer help you along the way. So, with any of this, where your upfront costs will be more is in your site prep fees and permits. But the infrastructure, if you're leasing it, that a lot of times is going to be at a low cost or a no cost to you. They're going to wrap that up into your contract. So you want to really work with your propane marketer to help build that and set that long-term contract to help you get the best fuel pricing. So here's a picture of standard private station. This picture shows a few different things. One, I believe that's a 1,000 gallon tank, and again, this is scalable, so you can add more tanks as you need. You have that little blue thing in the background. You have that's your pump, and then you have the dispenser. And then if you're using a card lock system on your unleaded and diesel system, this card lock can tie right into your fuel system also. So again, this is scalable. This can be bigger as you go. Now the difference here to the advanced station, these pictures show multiple dispensers and a larger propane tank as your supply. So that way, you're looking at those vehicles that are 50 plus in your fleet to be able to advance this. There's also a canopy system that can be put in over your dispensers. So the propane provider can help with that too. Temporary stations. This is one example of a temporary station, and this temporary station is on a flatbed trailer. It has a fuel dispenser, and if you take a look at the very front of the trailer, up top, there's a propane generator that is used to pump the propane into the vehicle. Now, any of these infrastructures can have a propane generator added to them, especially if you're in an area where the grid goes down because of storms and weather. So it's not a bad idea to add that generator to the infrastructure, so that way it doesn't take your infrastructure down and your vehicles can keep on rolling. Renewable propane, it has the same molecular structure as conventional propane, C3H8. So 3 carbons, 8 hydrocarbons. The conventional propane has a footprint of 78 grams. Renewable propane, it can be as low as 7 and as high as 47. And so with renewable propane, it's produced here in the United States, and it's used, and we produce about 4.5 million gallons a year of propane. And so one of the facilities, one of the largest facilities, is in Louisiana, and it gets shipped throughout the country. That's why you see some different carbon intensities on how it's shipped. So you'll see that. And then this is made of feedstocks, and then it's all feedstocks, vegetable oils, animal fats, or grease. So there are some things about renewable propane that helps it make it lower. So it's not that where conventional propane is a derivative of natural gas. These feedstocks help make it lower. So renewable propane is also a drop-in replacement, meaning if you're running conventional propane today and you decide you want to go to renewable propane, you don't have to do anything different to your systems or your vehicles. You can work with your propane marketer to bring in renewable propane and fill you that way, so you're running renewable throughout your fleet. So you have some options with renewable, and renewable propane is throughout the United States. So if you're in areas where they're asking you to reduce your carbon intensity or density, that way you can use that propane, that renewable propane, to help with that, and it helps meet your sustainability goals. So renewable propane is one of those things that can help you along the way. So I just want to go over some real world applications and some case studies next. So I talked a little bit about school buses. There's over 1 million students that are transported on propane school buses every day, and we have 14 states that have more than 500 buses in a fleet. So Alex talked about my me being a fleet director, I ran 80 propane school buses out of 227 in my fleet. My propane buses were the first things to go out every day. So because I wanted, one, to lower my carbon footprint, but two, I saw the savings that I was using by using propane. There's over 1,000 districts, and contractors that are using propane today. It could start from one bus to 500 plus buses. So there's a lot of buses out there that are using it, and so that's just a quick snapshot. Just a little case study to go here. School district in Pennsylvania, North Penn School District. They wanted to start investing in a cleaner option for their students, and they found that propane to be the better option compared to diesel. So what they did is they took and they adopted 100 buses into their fleet. And what they saw, not only a cleaner environment for their students, but they showed a 50% lower operating cost compared to diesel. So, that was huge. And then they also showed that it was compared with electric buses. Electric buses were expensive. They found propane buses. They're able to buy more propane buses to be able to help with that carbon footprint, to reduce it compared to buying electric. The former director also said one of the key reasons why they wanted propane in their fleet, because they were concerned about the students' health, and they wanted to make a cleaner option for their students. And just another case study that just on the private commercial side, there is a private UPS contractor, Maccabee Trucking, out of South Carolina. And they needed reliable vehicles that could perform in all types of weather and climates to get the mail delivered. So what they did is they were the first private contractor to adopt propane autogas to their vehicles. They started with 6 Ford F-750 propane vehicles, and in 2021. And so Maccabee Trucking chose propane autogas in order to achieve significant sustainability goals without sacrificing performance. They, sorry. The company's propane autogas trucks retain the same horsepower and torque, and eliminating the complex the complex DPF filter what they had on their trucks today. And so Maccabee is seeing propane autogas costs that are lower, 60 to 70% lower between fuel savings and maintenance costs. So this has been a great option for them. And so then they invested into the infrastructure and other improvements to their fleet. So propane is the right choice for your fleet and for your community. It helps improve the air quality. It helps with noise pollution, and there's energy security since it's produced here in the United States. You don't have to rely on the foreign oil and the pricing that it comes along. It's better for the environment. It's lower greenhouse gas emissions, and it helps reduce your carbon footprint. We've gone over that a little bit, and it's sustainable energy for your fleet. And then what you're going to see is the cost savings, not only in fuel, but in maintenance. And you're going to see economic efficiency. So this makes propane the right choice. All right, I think we have some time for some questions.
Great. Yeah, Joel, give you a minute there so you can get some water before we get into the
All right,
questions. A
thank
great
you.
presentation. Thanks for teaching our readers and teaching people that signed up today for the webinar. Some really interesting information. Let's start. I guess if you don't mind, I start with something. Can you talk a little bit about what the hesitancy usually is with propane and some of the misconceptions around how propane might not work for an operator, um, and from your perspective, how it can.
Yeah, well, first of all, I think the lack of education is a start. Um, with fleets, they are not sure how propane. Well, first of all, they're not even knowledgeable about
Mm.
propane auto gas vehicles being available for them and what type of the vehicles are there. And so I think that's one of the hurdles that we have to address, and that's part of why we're doing this today. And then the hesitancy is the benefits. There there's fleets that they get stuck in using um, you know then you have fleets that are stuck on one fuel and not really looking at how they could, one, reduce their carbon footprint, or do they want to, you know so that's a hurdle too, working with fleet owners to really help understand that.
Yeah. So I mean, you're basically saying propane's not uh, an end all be all solution, but it is part of the mix that could become the solution.
Right. I think diversifying your fleet is a good option, and propane fits in that diversified fleet really clear, because, it depends on the vehicle type that you're using it for. Propane, we don't have engines in every available for in like on the road truck options, but your
Right.
delivery vehicles, we have things that could fit in.
Great. Just remind our listeners, viewers, there's time to get some questions in. We'll move into one of the ones that came in. How does the current and projected stability of propane autogas pricing and supply compared to traditional fuels like gasoline and diesel? And what does this mean for long-term budget predictability for fleet managers?
Well, if you look at the fuel pricing of propane, uh, I'm just going to go over a 10-year period. And if you look at that graph, and they have that on the U.S. Department of Energy, propane is a very flat line going across. So you don't see spikes where you see, just even during the summer months for gasoline and diesel, where fuel prices spike up, propane stays very consistent uh, across, for pricing. And it's generally, you know, it depends on the area you live in. Um, it's at least $1 or less per gallon, and you're getting that same efficiency out of that. So that right there is one of the benefits. And we're relying on domestic fuel, not foreign fuel, and with those spikes in pricing too.
Great. Next question. Beyond fuel and emissions, what are some of the less obvious but impactful benefits of propane autogas that contribute to overall fleet efficiency, driver satisfaction, and vehicle longevity?
Well, let's just start with driver satisfaction. My own personal fleet, I managed for, I implemented propane uh, 10 years ago into my fleet. And what I had found that drivers, first of all, I had to educate them about the propane vehicle, and that it was a very safe vehicle to use. And So you help them understand. That was part of the training. And then what they really enjoyed was how quiet the vehicle was compared to a diesel engine, and the performance that, it didn't lack performance. So that was a big part of that. So, and then, the benefits of using a propane vehicle is, it you don't it warmed up quicker, compared to a diesel engine, because so there were some benefits there for the driver. So, Alex, I missed the other part of the question.
Aside from driver satisfaction, the question was about other benefits of propane.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So, as fleets transition to alternative fuels, you have sustainability goals. The goal is to lower your carbon footprint. So, we measured, we talk about wells to wheels, and propane shows that lower carbon footprint, wells to wheels, than any other alternative fuel, even over electricity, because electricity depends on where you're grid dependent. You might be you're getting your electricity from coal or natural gas or nuclear. It has a more of a carbon footprint, so they compared to propane.
Yeah, and as far as the learning curve goes, I know you touched on this, and it's touching back on driver satisfaction, but from a learning curve, I mean, it's a very small curve, right? I mean, this is very similar to anything gas, diesel that operators and fleet teams are already using at their operations.
Yeah, there's not a steep learning curve with propane. If you can fuel a gasoline or diesel vehicle, you can fuel a propane vehicle. If you can work on a gasoline engine or a diesel engine, you can work on a propane engine. There's the propane engine is very similar to a gasoline engine, so spark ignited. So, yes, there's not a great learning curve, but there's a lot of support out there with the systems that are out there. Roush Cleantech is one of those, and Alliance Autogas is another. They will help provide those trainings to your mechanics and your drivers as you need to.
Great. Joel, thanks again for your time. We have a couple more seconds if anyone wants to get a question in, but if they don't, this would be the last question we have. In what specific ways does integrating propane autogas contribute to a fleet's sustainability goals and reduce its environmental footprint? And how can these benefits be effectively communicated to stakeholders and the public?
Well, I think, first of all, you have to look at your sustainability goals. One is to lower your carbon footprint. Propane offers that with to lower that, because I just even with the last question, we talk about wells to wheels. If you measure your wells to wheels, you're going to see that lower carbon footprint with propane versus any other fuel. Then also you're going to take and celebrate not only the amount of emissions that you're not producing, but the total cost savings that you're able to do, that you may be able to take and roll that in to adding more vehicles to your fleet with that cost savings, and continue to lower your goals, lower your carbon footprint with the vehicles that you're replacing with.
Great. Joel, thanks again for your time. That is all the time we have for today, but for anyone who asked a question that wasn't answered, we'll be following up via email to answer your questions individually. We hope that you all enjoyed today's webinar. I want to again thank Joel Stetheit and Propane Education and Research for today's presentation. I also want to mention that this webinar will be available on demand at the Metro website at metro-magazine.com/webinars. Thank you all and have a great day.